All right, welcome to the Week 7 Forum. This week we are dealing with chapters 11 and 12. Chapter 11 deals with bureaucracy, and Chapter 12 deals with the federal court system. I think I'd also like to note that the reading project that we have that's due next week deals also with bureaucracy. I think whichever one of the articles you choose really kind of helps you get a sense of how bureaucracies work and why they're important and why they're oftentimes a political football in broader political struggles. So let's talk a little bit about bureaucracy and the federal courts. Why do we need bureaucratic agencies? A lot of Americans have this innate sort of, I don't like bureaucracy, or just if you say that word, a lot of Americans just have a negative connotation. The reality is, though, that bureaucracy equals capacity, right? Bureaucracy means that there are personnel and systems in place that enable programs to run efficiently and smoothly. If you look at this university, um, you can look at me and say, well, I'm the teacher, and what I am doing is sort of ground zero in terms of what it is that the university does, which is educate people. But without a lot of administrative support, you really don't get much done, right? If I didn't have an administrative assistant, you would, your paperwork would be at the untender mercies of a very absent-minded professor. And so you need more eyes on projects to be able to get a student from, freshman year to senior year to graduate degree. And so that's sort of what bureaucracy does. And I like to metaphorically talk about bureaucratic agencies as sort of the muscles of government, right? Every time we decide that the federal government needs to be doing something, Congress is going to pass a law that's probably going to create an agency that the president is then going to have to oversee to ensure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. So um, what you see in terms of the size of the federal bureaucracy is that really beginning in the 1930s and into the 1960s, the size of the federal bureaucracy just dramatically expanded. But then since then, again, because of political conflicts between liberals and conservatives over the size and scope of government, the size of the federal bureaucracies has actually declined since the 1990s. So, bureaucratic agencies are very important. The executive branch is organized hierarchically. The largest, agencies are what we call cabinet agencies. There's 16 of them. The most recent one is the Department of Homeland Security. Why do we have a Department of Homeland Security? Well, because we face external threats, and we need that federal capacity to do a variety of things. If you look at the different agencies within the Department of Homeland Security, that includes the border security folks. Um, it also includes the Coast Guard. It also includes, I believe today, the Secret Service. And it also includes the Federal Emergency Management Administration, which again, these are the folks that deal with natural calamities like hurricanes and things like that. You also have independent executive agencies. The Central Intelligence Agency is an independent executive agency. The Federal Bureau of Investigation was until recently an independent agency. Now it is part of the Department of Justice. You have a lot of those kinds of things. You also have government corporations, right? These are, basically public corporations that exist to provide services that the federal government thinks are sufficiently important, but that there's not enough incentive for private industries to actually do. If you look at what is it? What is a good example? Freddie Mac, right? That's a government corporation that provides mortgages for homeowners. Well, why do we do that? Well, because if the federal government is involved in that, then they're more inclined to take actually what Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae do are manage home mortgages. They take the risk off the books of banks. So banks can extend more loans. And the fact that there are more loans that are available means that home ownership expands, right? And that's one of the main pathways for Americans into the middle class to own a home. Okay, that's one of the single most durable, valuable things that we can have that really generally always is appreciating. Okay. Um, let's see. Federal agencies also help maintain a strong economy. We have a number of regulatory agencies. We have the Securities and Exchange Commission. What is their job? Their job is to find out if people are manipulating the market and punish them if they're doing so illegally. Okay. We also have the Federal Reserve Board that works to try and manage the flow of money into the economy. They can actually release more money into the economy by lowering interest rates, or they can tighten the money supply by raising interest rates. And why would they do that? Well, if there's too much money in the economy, that leads to inflation. If there's not enough money in the economy, that leads to recession and contraction. And so you really want an appropriate supply of money in the economy at any given time. Let's see, what are the forces that control bureaucracy? The president can issue executive orders that can alter their behavior. The courts can basically hear challenges to see whether a congressional agency is violating their rights. Congress can affect their budget, can pass laws eliminating them or strengthening them. Okay, so these are all really important things. The relationship between bureaucracy and democracy is not always a great one because, again, ruled by experts. These are oftentimes not elected people. This is something that, for example, that Florida Governor Ron DeSantis was saying in attacking Anthony Fauci, who is the head of the National Institute for Health. He basically said, why are we deferring to some unelected bureaucrat? And so, again, that's a situation where you have to have that right balance, and you have to have a bureaucratic accountability. With regard to the federal courts, the legal system exists to adjudicate disputes, and especially with relevance to this class, it's about basically identifying criminal activity and punishing people, holding people accountable for criminal activity. So there are different types of courts: trial courts, appellate courts, and typically Supreme Courts. The trial courts is where the conflicts are originally adjudicated, where a judgment is rendered, and then you have appellate courts. This is where if somebody thinks that a case was decided wrongly, that's where you're actually going to hear appeals. And then, of course, the Supreme Court is where basically the court of highest appeal will say, yeah, either yay or nay, the person had a point or not. Federal courts actually hear a relatively small percentage of all the cases. Most of the criminal cases that occur in the United States are basically adjudicated in local and state courts. Let's see, the power of the Supreme Court, an essential part of that is this idea of judicial review. Now, this is something that's not really clearly articulated in Article 3 of the Constitution, but it does say that the judicial power shall be vested in a Supreme Court and such inferior courts as Congress shall from time to time ordain and establish. So, what the courts have effectively said is that an essential aspect of the judicial power is this notion of being able to say whether an act of the president or an act of a bureaucratic agency or an action of Congress or state government are constitutional or not. So it basically sets up the Supreme Court and the federal courts generally as defenders of our constitutional rights. And it's one of the reasons why historically the Supreme Court has been very highly respected among Americans. So let's see, what are some of the things that go into the court hearing a case? You have this idea of what they call a rule of 4. There are 9 justices, and at least 4 justices have to agree to hear a case. There are a lot of strategic things that go into whether they're going to hear certain kinds of cases. Let's see, what are some decisions? What are some factors that weigh in on judges and Supreme Court justices' decision making? One of the most important things, of course, we talk about ideology, and most judges will say ideology doesn't weigh, the law weighs. And so, most judges have a theory of jurisprudence. For example, a lot of the conservative justices on the court argue that they are originalists. They want to read the text of a statute or a law, and they want to understand as much as possible what the intentions were of the lawmakers. And so that is innately sort of a conservative interpretation of how they ought to rule, that, they ought to rule as the people who drafted the law intended the law to be written. And of course, there's a great deal uh, of uh, of controversy over, the degree to which judges actually adhere to whatever theory it is that they're acting upon. But a lot of people argue these days that judges and justices are increasingly political beings and that they are increasingly ideological beings. Like most Americans, they're being drawn into kind of an ideological conflict between liberalism and, conservatism. So um, it's important to keep in mind that the courts are designed to be what we call republican institutions, which is to say they are designed to protect us from too much democracy, from the passions of majorities who may, want to, do things that are harmful to minorities. And to that extent, the courts have functioned fairly well in terms of protecting the rights of minorities and protecting the rights of people accused of crimes. Whether that's going to be the case going forward, I guess we're going to find out, right? So there's a lot to talk about. If there's anything in either of these chapters that you don't understand, ask me a question. In fact, just figure out a question. What's something that you want to hear about from the other students, right? Or from me. So let's have a great week of discussion, okay?